Hey there friends, it's Codiak here. Welcome back to Legacy Gaming. If you've seen our tweets recently, then you know our whole team has been knee-deep in Remnant 2 for about a week now. We honestly can't show anything new quite yet, but we are free to talk about our first impressions of the game, and as gaming creators, one thing we always want to do is help you determine if a game is worth playing. So let's get into it. Keep in mind, based on the footage limitations, some of the content you see is not going to line up with what I'm talking about, so feel free to close your eyes and treat this more like a podcast. So to start, it's really no secret that we're having an incredible time with Remnant 2, and regardless of if the developers gave us access to the game early or not, we'd still be playing this game top to bottom because Remnant from the Ashes is on some of our top 5 lists. Where you notice the evolution from Remnant 1 to Remnant 2 almost immediately is with the archetypes and the overall class identity. The game, for all intents and purposes, feels more like an adventure RPG, and a lot of that has to do with the way the team has reworked everything that feeds into a character's loadout. Skills really help define each archetype and are completely new to the game, so while mod powers function largely the same and are tied to weapons, your skills are tied to your archetype choice, which helps establish that sense of class identity. Alongside that archetype choice, you also get a slew of passive perks as well as an archetype trait, and that feels impactful. It levels up passively in parallel to normal progression, and then once it reaches level 10, becomes available in the general trait pool, so you can change archetypes around and still have access to one of the things that made the archetype unique. Honestly, it's a brilliant system that just furthers the insane amount of build potential within the game. Most of the things that pipe into the character system are great, but it's not a perfect system, and we have some small nitpicks specifically around the cost of that flexibility. The game touts playing the way you want and offers that up, but you do have to pay for some of those options, and the cost is pretty high, especially starting out. That also impacts your ability to try everything out, because you'll get a new weapon and want to immediately test it, but quickly realize there's not enough scrap in the world to keep up with all the upgrading. It's a limitation that we understand but don't love because it does nothing to elevate the experience. It's simply a burden, and when there is so much elsewhere within the game to offer satisfaction, it's a roadblock that serves, in our opinion, no real purpose. To put a bow on archetypes, for now, you also have to consider you can, after a little progression, have 2 equipped, which means you get all of the benefits of one archetype and most of another, which is just insane. This is all completely new to Remnant 2, and the team absolutely nails the execution while also doing something unique that no other game is doing in the process. Livid would kick me if I didn't also mention what Remnant 2 took away from the game, the dependence on armor sets. And while we've talked about that before in other videos, it's a huge deal, and we really understood that completely once we started unlocking mutators. Because you're not worried about set bonuses, which are no longer tied to armor, when you find a new set, you can almost always just slap it on and have fun with it. Mutators take the idea of set bonuses and instead give you the ability to slot specific items on your weapons for those added effects. You do have to kill aberrations, which are challenging elite enemies to unlock a mutator, so it takes time, but that armor restriction a lot of Remnant 1 players talked about is gone. I want to pivot and talk about the worlds for a minute. My god, the level design and art direction is just incredible. I walked into Losum for the first time, the Fae side, and was just completely blown away. Like, we're talking super ornate Anor Londo vibes here. Not only is each world beautifully detailed, but the efforts the team has gone through to make each zone more expansive and feel unique is special. Even at 150 hours spread across our entire team, we've only scratched the surface, and that's saying something. The joys of trying to find that perfect tile set, you know, the ones that hold the clues to new items, is still very much a thing, but the more immersion-breaking concerns from the first game really haven't been a factor. The balance between procedurally generated content and the handcrafted set pieces works, and that's not something a lot of teams have been able to perfect. There's also plenty of secrets. Oh, the joy of finding secrets in Remnant 2. You might not know this, but Livid is the true Remnant expert on the team. I'm really the newbie, and to unpack some of the things Gunfire Games has hidden around the map is absurd. We're talking actual secrets, not something marked on a map that requires you to push a button. The amount of brainpower it takes to solve some of these things is fantastic, and an experience I didn't realize I missed in my video games. Obviously, no spoilers here, this is just impressions, but when you do go hands-on, check everything, and I do mean everything. For the sake of time, I think we need to touch on combat, because at the end of the day, that's a huge factor for a lot of players. The long and short of it is this: it feels absolutely amazing. The clunkiness that is often associated with Remnant 1 has, in our opinion, received a nice coat of polish, but that's to be expected given the core development team is still very much intact. Do we still mess up trying to revive each other and end up petting the dog? You bet, but it still feels way better. Where some people might be surprised is on the subject of difficulty. It's a tough game, there's no doubt about that, and we all know that. But to find that on many fronts the game is more challenging than Remnant from the Ashes may be news to some of you. I don't want to deter anyone from considering the game, just realize that if you play most games on a harder setting, you're gonna need to temper expectations. As a group that started out on the veteran difficulty, still struggling at times to defeat some of the game's challenging bosses, yeah, it's a shock, but that only furthers the satisfaction of actually defeating something. I'd classify Remnant 2's difficulty progression as stepping stones. You play on a lower difficulty so that you can gear up and reach that next rung on the ladder, then grind it out some more, reach that next difficulty until you're eventually pushing Apocalypse, the hardest difficulty in the game. The best part? Each difficulty presents the chance to find new loot in general and from bosses. And man, speaking of bosses, let's just talk about that for a second. I love a good boss fight, I really do. And when I got my first taste of some of the fights in Remnant 2, I just felt complete. There are some fights where things feel very Souls-like. You're dealing with a powerful enemy that utilizes a couple core abilities. There are other fights where your brain is constantly on overdrive as you're trying to learn patterns, coordinate movements, and just control the chaos. There's one fight in particular, again, no real spoilers, where you have to deal with one enemy on a platform while also watching out for another boss that can shoot a laser beam down a center pathway, instantly killing you. It's that sort of dual focus that is rare in a video game and goes to show the level of depth the developers put into some of these fights. Now, getting a bit technical for a second, there was a little noise around the game's performance leading up to launch. I have to tell you guys, 3 of us playing on 3 completely different PC setups, we barely noticed a thing. Sure, we ran into the occasional network issue when trying to co-op, but in terms of stability and frame rate issues, it was silky smooth 99% of the time. We definitely ran into a few bugs along the way, usually tied to the environment, but we were able to report those directly to the team, and more often than not, they were already on a list to be addressed. It's clear the devs tested and tested again, and after the abysmal year of base PC ports and just general instability with new releases, it's a breath of fresh air. We'll have much more to talk about in the weeks ahead, including our full review of the game on day 1. This was just a taste, but as a team that is absolutely in love with Remnant 2, we want to do our part to support developers that we believe in and truly think this game should be on everyone's radar. As always, friends, if you like our content and you want to support the channel, you know what to do. Hit that thumbs up and consider subscribing. My name is Codiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching and play on.